one more before I throw it open. That is, there's church leaders here as well, and maybe some aspiring church leaders. As one myself, a lot of our training was in expository preaching.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, in terms of how your sort of apologetic, philosophically based apologetic ministry can be integrated into church life. Is there such a thing as apologetic preaching? And where does that sit alongside what we would normally do in our churches?
Well, let me say two things about that. First, if you're a pastor or a minister, I am not calling upon you to shoulder an additional responsibility of having an apologetics ministry in your church. You already have enough on your plate, and you don't need someone to add an additional responsibility. Instead, what I challenge you to do is to try to identify an interested layperson in your congregation who has a passion and interest in this, and empower him to head up such an apologetics ministry in the church, teaching a class, for example, or leading book studies. You could pay for him to go to apologetics conferences or take online courses so that he could become trained. But let him bear the responsibility and the burden for you by empowering him to do this. Second thing I want to say is that you can pepper your sermons with apologetical and historical points of interest that will lend credibility to your preaching. Let me just illustrate this from our own pastor. Our assistant pastor will often use archaeological details or other historical details to lend color to the passage that he's preaching on out of the scriptures. So he was preaching the other day on Jesus stilling the storm on the Sea of Galilee. And to illustrate this, he had PowerPoint slides of the Sea of Galilee, what it looks like, where it is. And then he had PowerPoint slides of this first century fishing boat that was excavated just a few years ago in the mud of the Sea of Galilee when the waters had receded during the drought season. And it enabled us to see what a Galilean fishing boat actually looked like. And this is what Jesus and the disciples were in during that time. This kind of historical detail makes the story come alive as a real historical event rather than a fairy tale in a book of fables. Similarly, he was preaching on the children of Israel, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown into the fiery furnace by King Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament. And the way he illustrated this was he put up diagrams and PowerPoint slides of what a Mesopotamian kiln looked like and how they fired these bricks and what these furnaces looked like and what it would be like for these men to be thrown into this massive kiln for baking bricks. And again, it just made that passage come alive as a real historical event. So think of ways in which, when you're preaching on a passage, you can add interest and color to it to make it again appear not like a mythological story about Jesus and his friends, but a real historical event that actually transpired.